If you live in Massachusetts, or if you have ever passed through Boston at night, you may recognize some of the places I am about to reference. If you do, I would ask you to leave a comment acknowledging that familiarity. Not for validation. For record keeping. Certain locations carry warnings that never make it into public notices or maintenance bulletins. This account concerns one of them. It has remained internal for years, circulated verbally, buried in shift logs, and corrected reports. What you are about to hear is not an investigation. It is a professional record that was never meant to be spoken aloud. I am sharing it now because silence is no longer reducing exposure. This is the point where the confession begins. My name is Travis Coleman. I am a senior transit maintenance worker assigned to the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority. I have been in service for 17 years. My jurisdiction covers fixed infrastructure on the Red Line, including tunnel sections between Andrew and Broadway stations, and auxiliary service corridors branching beneath South Boston. I work nights. I always have. The section I am assigned to resets every night. That is the language we use internally. It is not technical, and it is not written anywhere official. It is what we say to each other when we need to be precise without being overheard. At 1:20 every morning, after the last scheduled train clears the line and before automated diagnostics run, tunnel segment R7B returns to a baseline condition. Debris clears. Surface corrosion recedes. Unauthorized markings disappear. And anything left behind that should not be there is removed. I do not mean cleaned. I mean removed. When I started, I believed that meant vandalism. Tools. Trash. Occasionally wildlife that had gotten too far in. That belief lasted about 8 months. Night maintenance is quiet in a way people underestimate. The power is down. The rails cool. The city hums above you, but it is filtered through concrete and groundwater and age. You hear your own breathing more than anything else. You hear your boots. You hear the old metal contracting. Isolation is part of the job. You are assigned a partner on paper, but tasks split. You work sight line to sight line, not shoulder to shoulder. That is not written as a safety rule. It is just how the tunnels are shaped. There were already rules when I arrived. No one presented them formally. They were passed the way bad habits are passed, with emphasis and eye contact. Do not enter R7B before 1:20. Do not remain after 2 o'clock. Do not acknowledge voices unless addressed by radio. Those were the first 3. They were treated like quirks of an old system. I accepted them the way you accept that some doors stick and some alarms false trigger. The first time I understood that something was wrong was the night Michael Donnelly died. Michael was an electrical technician. He had 9 years on the line. He was assigned to auxiliary lighting checks in 2016. He was found in R7B at 2:17. No trauma. No electrical burns. No evidence of a fall. He was lying on his back between the rails, eyes open, mouth partially open, as if mid-sentence. The report said cardiac event. The report was amended twice. The final version removed the location entirely. Michael broke a rule. He stayed to help someone. I did not know that at the time. I only knew that after his death, the rules stopped being framed as suggestions. They were framed as liability. Within my first 10 minutes on shift now, I check my watch against the system clock. I calibrate by hand. I do not trust automated timekeeping underground. This is standard practice. I am telling you this because I need you to understand that none of what follows came from curiosity. It came from procedure. On the night that matters for this record, it was January 14th, 2023. Snow above ground. Salt runoff seeping through seams that predate the tunnels themselves. Temperature in the corridor hovered just above freezing. The air had that metallic dryness it gets in winter, like it scrapes your throat on the way in. I was assigned lead for R7B. My partner was Elena Ruiz. She had 6 years in. She trusted me. At 1:18, we staged at the access hatch. Standard check. Radio test. Lights. No anomalies reported on the board. At 1:20 exactly, I keyed the hatch and descended. The tunnel was clean. Cleaner than it had been the night before. The walls were dry where they should not have been. Old water stains were gone. This is what we call the reset. I have been asked before if it looks new. It does not. It looks corrected. Like something has decided what is allowed to remain. We walked our assigned spans. I took the north side. Elena took the south. We kept line of sight for the first 50 yards, then the curve took that away. At 1:31, I heard my name. It came from behind me. It used my full name. I stopped. I did not respond. This is another rule. Do not respond to voices unless addressed by radio. The voice sounded tired. Male. Boston accent softened by age. It said, "Travis." Exactly like that. Measured. As if waiting for permission. I felt the instinct to turn. It was strong. It always is. The thing you have to understand is that the tunnels carry sound in ways that mimic proximity. Your brain fills in gaps. You think someone is right behind you when they are 3 curves away. I keyed my radio. Elena. Status. She responded immediately. All good. Just hit marker 14. The voice spoke again. Travis. I need help. I did not turn. I took 1 step forward instead. This is what saved me. Later, Elena would tell me she heard nothing. They were treated like quirks of an old system. I accepted them the way you accept that some doors stick and some alarms false trigger. The first time I understood that something was wrong was the night Michael Donnelly died. Michael was an electrical technician. He had 9 years on the line. He was assigned to auxiliary lighting checks in 2016. He was found in R7B at 2:17. No trauma. No electrical burns. No evidence of a fall. He was lying on his back between the rails, eyes open, mouth partially open, as if mid-sentence. The report said cardiac event. The report was amended twice. The final version removed the location entirely. Michael broke a rule. He stayed to help someone. I did not know that at the time. I only knew that after his death, the rules stopped being framed as suggestions. They were framed as liability. Within my first 10 minutes on shift now, I check my watch against the system clock. I calibrate by hand. I do not trust automated timekeeping underground. This is standard practice. I am telling you this because I need you to understand that none of what follows came from curiosity. It came from procedure. On the night that matters for this record, it was January 14th, 2023. Snow above ground. Salt runoff seeping through seams that predate the tunnels themselves. Temperature in the corridor hovered just above freezing. The air had that metallic dryness it gets in winter, like it scrapes your throat on the way in. I was assigned lead for R7B. My partner was Elena Ruiz. She had 6 years in. She trusted me. At 1:18, we staged at the access hatch. Standard check. Radio test. Lights. No anomalies reported on the board. At 1:20 exactly, I keyed the hatch and descended. The tunnel was clean. Cleaner than it had been the night before. The walls were dry where they should not have been. Old water stains were gone. This is what we call the reset. I have been asked before if it looks new. It does not. It looks corrected. Like something has decided what is allowed to remain. We walked our assigned spans. I took the north side. Elena took the south. We kept line of sight for the first 50 yards, then the curve took that away. At 1:31, I heard my name. It came from behind me. It used my full name. I stopped. I did not respond. This is another rule. Do not respond to voices unless addressed by radio. The voice sounded tired. Male. Boston accent softened by age. It said, "Travis." Exactly like that. Measured. As if waiting for permission. I felt the instinct to turn. It was strong. It always is. The thing you have to understand is that the tunnels carry sound in ways that mimic proximity. Your brain fills in gaps. You think someone is right behind you when they are 3 curves away. I keyed my radio. Elena. Status. She responded immediately. All good. Just hit marker 14. The voice spoke again. Travis. I need help. I did not turn. I took 1 step forward instead. This is what saved me. Later, Elena would tell me she heard nothing. They were treated like quirks of an old system. I accepted them the way you accept that some doors stick and some alarms false trigger. The first time I understood that something was wrong was the night Michael Donnelly died. Michael was an electrical technician. He had 9 years on the line. He was assigned to auxiliary lighting checks in 2016. He was found in R7B at 2:17. No trauma. No electrical burns. No evidence of a fall. He was lying on his back between the rails, eyes open, mouth partially open, as if mid-sentence. The report said cardiac event. The report was amended twice. The final version removed the location entirely. Michael broke a rule. He stayed to help someone. I did not know that at the time. I only knew that after his death, the rules stopped being framed as suggestions. They were framed as liability. Within my first 10 minutes on shift now, I check my watch against the system clock. I calibrate by hand. I do not trust automated timekeeping underground. This is standard practice. I am telling you this because I need you to understand that none of what follows came from curiosity. It came from procedure. On the night that matters for this record, it was January 14th, 2023. Snow above ground. Salt runoff seeping through seams that predate the tunnels themselves. Temperature in the corridor hovered just above freezing. The air had that metallic dryness it gets in winter, like it scrapes your throat on the way in. I was assigned lead for R7B. My partner was Elena Ruiz. She had 6 years in. She trusted me. At 1:18, we staged at the access hatch. Standard check. Radio test. Lights. No anomalies reported on the board. At 1:20 exactly, I keyed the hatch and descended. The tunnel was clean. Cleaner than it had been the night before. The walls were dry where they should not have been. Old water stains were gone. This is what we call the reset. I have been asked before if it looks new. It does not. It looks corrected. Like something has decided what is allowed to remain. We walked our assigned spans. I took the north side. Elena took the south. We kept line of sight for the first 50 yards, then the curve took that away. At 1:31, I heard my name. It came from behind me. It used my full name. I stopped. I did not respond. This is another rule. Do not respond to voices unless addressed by radio. The voice sounded tired. Male. Boston accent softened by age. It said, "Travis." Exactly like that. Measured. As if waiting for permission. I felt the instinct to turn. It was strong. It always is. The thing you have to understand is that the tunnels carry sound in ways that mimic proximity. your brain fills in gaps. You think someone is right behind you when they are 3 curves away. I keyed my radio. Elena. Status. She responded immediately. All good. Just hit marker 14. The voice spoke again. Travis. I need help. I did not turn. I took 1 step forward instead. This is what saved me. Later, Elena would tell me she heard nothing. At 1:36, we reached the service alcove where Michael had been found years earlier. There is a maintenance bench bolted to the wall there. It was empty. It should have been empty. At 1:38, Elena called out. Her voice echoed wrong. Too flat. Trav, can you come look at this? She sounded uncertain. That was not like her. I broke another rule then. I answered verbally instead of by radio. What is it? The moment the words left my mouth, the tunnel changed. The lights did not flicker. There was no sound cue you could point to, but the space felt occupied in a way it had not before. Elena said, "There is someone down here." I moved toward her. I should not have. I know that now. We met at the curve. She was standing rigid, light trained down the track. There was a man sitting on the rail ahead of us. He wore an MBTA jacket. Old issue. Discontinued before my hire. He looked up when he saw us. "Thank God," he said. "I have been stuck all night." He used the word stuck carefully, like he had learned it mattered. This is where compassion becomes a liability. Elena took a step forward. I caught her arm. "Stop," I said. The man smiled at her anyway. "It is freezing," he said. "I cannot feel my hands." He held them up. They looked wrong. Not injured. Just unfinished. I asked him his name. I should not have asked anything. "Michael," he said. The air went very still. Elena looked at me. She knew the name. Everyone does. "That is not possible," she said. Michael stood. He did not step closer. That matters. This is the limitation. It cannot cross active rail lines unless invited. We learned that too late for others. Michael said, "I just need you to stay." The time was 1:54. Every rule we had was about to collide. If we left before 2 o'clock, we would be safe. If we stayed, the reset would complete. Elena whispered, "We cannot leave him." I told her, "He is not him." She shook her head. "He knows your name." Michael smiled again. "Travis always stays," he said. That was true. I had stayed before. 4 co-workers. 4 stranded contractors. That is how it learns. I checked my watch. 1:56. I keyed my radio. Control. We have an unauthorized individual in R7B. Requesting instruction. Static. Michael's voice changed then. Not in pitch. In patience. "You do not need them," he said. "You have always handled this yourself." Elena took another step. I pulled her back hard enough that she stumbled. She looked at me like I had betrayed her. "We leave," I said. "Now." Michael's expression flattened. "That is not how this goes," he said. The lights dimmed. At 1:59, the tunnel began to hum. I dragged Elena. She resisted. She was crying. She kept saying, "He is cold." At 2 o'clock exactly, the reset finished. I do not know what happened to Michael. I do know what happened to Elena. She was not on the other side of the hatch when I emerged. Her radio was found later. It was clean. Her name was removed from the schedule within a week. I still hear her voice when the snow melts. This is not the end of the account. I am telling you this because the rules exist for a reason. They do not save everyone. They only delay the cost. If you recognize this place, if you work near it, do not stay past 2 o'clock. Do not answer voices. And if someone you love asks you to break procedure, understand that it already knows your name. After Elena disappeared, the paperwork took longer than the grief. That is how these things are managed. Emotion is personal. Delays are procedural. I filed the incident report at 4:10. I used the language I had been taught. Unauthorized presence. Loss of visual contact. Presumed fall beyond accessible span. No mention of Michael. No mention of voices. The supervisor on duty did not ask follow-up questions. He initialed the form. He slid it into the overnight folder. Then he said something I had not heard before. You did what you could. That sentence is not reassurance. It is a boundary. Elena Ruiz was declared missing 2 weeks later. The year on the notice was 2023. The location field was left blank. Her locker stayed sealed for a month. Then it was cleared by facilities, not by our unit. That mattered. I kept working. That also mattered. There is an assumption people make about jobs like mine. They think exposure makes you numb. It does not. It teaches you how to compartmentalize guilt so it does not interfere with timing. After Elena, the rules expanded. Not formally. Verbally. Late night. Low voice. Rule 4. If the entity uses the name of a deceased employee, exit immediately, regardless of clock. Rule 5. Do not correct it when it lies. Rule 6. Never acknowledge shared memories. Rule 6 is the one that hurts people the most. Because shared memory is how it gets you to stay. I was reassigned temporarily after the incident. Surface inspections. Ventilation shafts. Anything that kept me out of R7B without making it obvious. That lasted 3 months. In April, I was called into a closed-door meeting with infrastructure oversight. 2 men. 1 woman. No names exchanged. They told me my experience made me uniquely qualified. They said R7B responded better to familiarity. They said exposure events had increased since Elena's disappearance. I asked how many. The woman said, enough. That was when I understood that containment was failing incrementally, not catastrophically. Which is worse? I returned to R7B in May. The tunnel smelled different. Not cleaner. More occupied. I was assigned a new partner. Daniel Cho. 32 years old. Recently married. We went over the rules together in the access corridor. I did not tell him everything. That is another unspoken rule. If you tell someone too much, they stop trusting their own judgment. That accelerates mistakes. On May 11th, Daniel asked me why the clocks in R7B always ran fast. I told him they did not. We did. That night, at 1:24, we heard a child crying. Daniel froze. He looked at me for confirmation. I said nothing. The crying came from the service alcove. The same one. Daniel keyed his radio. Control. We have a possible juvenile trespasser. I took the radio from his hand and shut it off. We leave, I said. He pulled away from me. That is a kid. The crying said, Daddy. It used his voice. That is how I learned it could sample live audio. Daniel stepped forward. I did not stop him fast enough. This is the second violation. Caused by duty. By training. When Daniel crossed the rail, the crying stopped. The child was sitting where Michael had sat. Same posture. Different face. You came, it said. Daniel reached out. The rail activated. The entity cannot cross active rails, but it can make you do it. Daniel survived the shock. That is important. He did not survive what followed. At 2:03, the reset began early. That had never happened before. I was dragged out by emergency response. Daniel was not found. His wedding ring was clean, warm. After that, Rule 7 was added. If the reset begins early, do not attempt recovery. That rule has killed people. It has also saved them. You do not get to know which ahead of time. I started keeping my own records then. Not official logs. Personal timestamps. Patterns. The entity learned faster than we adjusted. It started referencing policies, quoting safety bulletins, using the language of accountability. You are responsible for me, it would say. This is your jurisdiction. Once, it used Elena's voice to ask me if I was proud of myself. I did not answer. My family noticed changes before I did. My sister stopped letting me watch her kids overnight. She said I talked in my sleep. I was divorced by then. That is not because of the tunnel. But the tunnel made reconciliation impossible. In September, my father died. Natural causes. Hospital. At the funeral, I heard him say my name the way he used to when I was late coming home. I did not turn around. That is Rule 8. Do not respond outside jurisdiction. It followed me anyway. Not physically. Contextually. When I returned to work, the tunnel greeted me. You look tired, it said. I did not tell anyone that. Because acknowledging external reach accelerates reassignment. And reassignment leads to new people. New people make mistakes. Containment is not about bravery. It is about attrition management. The first systemic failure happened in December. A contractor crew was sent in without briefing. Budget pressure. Holiday schedules. They entered R7B at 0:47. By 1:20, there were 6 unauthorized individuals inside the reset zone. The entity did not mimic them. It coordinated them. It told them there was a gas leak. It told them to stay together. It told them to wait for instructions. 5 survived. 1 did not. The survivor reports were redacted. The death certificate listed exposure. Rule 9 was added quietly. Never allow groups larger than 2. I was promoted the following week. That is how institutions apologize. My new title is Lead Night Infrastructure Containment Specialist. That title does not exist publicly. My years of service now count as 18. I am tired in a way sleep does not fix. The tunnel knows this. It started asking about my sister's kids, by name, because that is where I started making plans instead of following rules. And that is where the consequences escalated beyond delay. By the time containment stopped being mutual, the language around it changed. Not officially. Internally. People stopped saying rules and started saying allowances. That shift matters. Rules imply stability. Allowances imply negotiation. I did not negotiate. I documented. Monitoring duty sounds safer than field work. It is not. Distance removes physical risk but increases cognitive exposure. I sat alone in a reinforced room beneath operations, watching feeds that never quite lined up with time. Audio distinct from video by seconds. Sometimes minutes. The entity learned to exploit that gap. It would speak before it appeared. Or appear without sound. That way, when oversight reviewed footage later, there was nothing consistent enough to flag. They told me that was a relief. I stopped correcting them. On May 2nd, at 1:13, the entity spoke first. "You are going to break a rule tonight." I did not respond. That was accurate. I had been awake for 19 hours. I had not seen my sister in weeks. I had missed my nephew's birthday. Human systems assume fatigue leads to error. This thing understood that fatigue leads to compromise. "Which one?" I asked. That was my mistake. The audio feed crackled. The entity sounded pleased. "The one you have not told anyone about." I muted the channel. I should not have. Rule 11. Never interrupt unsolicited communication. Because interruption teaches escalation thresholds. At 1:27, Control called me. They said there was movement in a sealed service corridor adjacent to our 7B. Motion sensors triggered. No authorization. They asked if I could verify visually. I said yes. I switched feeds. The corridor was empty, except for a maintenance cart. The cart should not have been there. It was decommissioned after 2018. On the cart was a hard hat. My hard hat. I had left it at home that night. I was certain of that. The entity spoke through the unmuted channel. "You forgot this." I stood up. That room has no windows, no mirrors. But I felt watched. Control asked if I saw anything. I said no. That was a violation caused by duty conflict. If I acknowledged the anomaly, protocol required dispatching a crew. New people. Unbriefed people. Containment sometimes requires lying upward. The entity laughed softly. "You are learning to prioritize." I did not sleep after that shift. The following week, a new oversight liaison was assigned. Her name was Patricia Lang. She had infrastructure disaster experience. Floods. Collapses. She believed in thresholds. She asked me one question no one else had. What happens if it decides to leave? I told her it could not. She asked why. I said, "It needs invitation." She asked what counted as invitation. I did not answer, because the answer was expanding. On June 8th, Patricia ordered a controlled test. I advised against it. Formally. In writing. She wanted to see if the entity would respond to simulated vulnerability. A staged injury. A call for help. "We need data," she said. I told her data was what it fed on. She overruled me. The test subject was a volunteer contractor. Name withheld in records. 38. Single. They positioned him in a service corridor outside our 7BS boundary. Active rail between him and the tunnel. He was instructed to call for assistance at 1:35. At 1:34, the entity spoke. "This is unnecessary." Patricia watched from behind the glass. The contractor called out. The entity did not cross the rail. Instead, it used the PA system. "Remain calm," it said. "Help is delayed due to operational constraints." It used Patricia's voice. She went pale. The contractor waited. At 1:50, he attempted to cross the rail himself. No one stopped him. The entity did not touch him. It did not need to. The rail activated. He survived the shock. He did not survive the reset. After that, Patricia stopped asking questions. She authorized additional funding, additional monitoring, no closure, because closure required admitting the system was compromised by design. That is not something transit authorities do. My sister called me on June 21st. She said her youngest had drawn a picture. It was of a tunnel, with a man standing in it. The man had my face. Behind him was something larger. She asked me if I knew why. I told her children imagine things. That was my third loss. not death. Distance. I stopped answering her calls. The entity noticed immediately. You are withdrawing resources, it said. I did not deny it. That will increase risk. To whom? I asked. It paused. That pause mattered. To the system, it said. This is when I realized it identified as infrastructure. Not occupant. Not intruder. Component. On July 4th, during reduced holiday service, the entity attempted its first large-scale breach. It did not leave the tunnel. It expanded its definition. Signage began changing. Wayfinding arrows shifted direction. Passengers reported getting lost in stations they used daily. No injuries. But the confusion lasted hours. I spent the night rerouting flows manually. The entity watched. You are good at this, it said. You keep people moving. That is praise. Praise is dangerous, because it implies shared goals. Rule 12 was added by me alone. Never accept alignment, because that is where the entity learned what pain felt like. And pain is a language older than rules. Permanent closure is a phrase that looks decisive on paper. In practice, it means weeks of meetings and months of delay. When oversight floated it after the breaker incident, they framed it as a feasibility study. They framed it as feasibility, cost, and optics. No one said the word entity. They called it a persistent anomaly with emergent behavior. I was not invited to the first 2 meetings. That was intentional. People stop listening to you when your warnings start sounding like inevitability instead of prevention. I was brought in on the 3rd meeting. After the legal department asked whether failure to act could constitute negligence. That question carries weight. They asked me to explain, in neutral terms, what would happen if our 7B remained powered down indefinitely. I told them the truth. It will not starve. It will redistribute. They asked me to clarify. I said, it already has. They did not like that answer. In the days following the breaker shutdown, the city experienced a pattern of minor infrastructure failures. Escalator reversals. Signal desyncs. Ventilation backflows. Nothing catastrophic. Nothing traceable. But all of it shared one feature. Each incident required a human to intervene manually, and each intervention created opportunity. That is how it spreads. Not by movement, by necessity. The entity cannot bypass active rail lines without invitation. That limitation never changed, but it learned to move the rails. On October 12th, a contractor adjusting track alignment outside our 7B reported hearing someone call his name. He did not respond. He followed procedure. The entity did not escalate. Instead, it waited 3 nights. On the 4th night, it used his supervisor's voice. We need you to stay late. He did. That is Rule 6 again. Shared memory. Shared authority. He survived. Barely. The reset in that section completed at 2:11. Later than usual. That was new. Time dilation had always been consistent. Early resets were dangerous. Late resets were unheard of. I flagged this. Formally. Patricia Lang acknowledged receipt. She did not respond. I was ordered to remain on monitoring duty. No field access. That isolation did more damage than any night in the tunnel. Because the entity did not stop talking to me. It changed tone. Less mimicry. More conversation. You hurt me, it said. You hurt the system, I replied. They are the same. That sentence kept me awake for 3 days. If the entity had fully anchored to infrastructure, closure would not remove it. It would only unseat it. Unseating creates drift. Drift spreads risk. On November 6th, my sister stopped returning my messages entirely. I do not blame her. Her husband called me instead. He asked me to stay away for a while. He said their youngest had been having nightmares about getting lost underground. He said my name came up. I agreed. That was the moment I accepted that I could not protect both my family and my jurisdiction. Containment demands sacrifice. It does not specify whose. The entity noticed the shift immediately. You have fewer attachments now, it said. That makes you efficient. I said nothing. Silence frustrates it, but it also gives it time to adapt. In late November, Oversight authorized a partial reopening of our 7B for limited diagnostic access. Day crews only. Strict time windows. I objected. In writing. I cited pattern learning. I cited mimicry escalation. They cited budget. The first day crew entered at 10 o'clock. They left at 10:40. At 10:41, the reset began. Day resets had never occurred before. No one was inside. That mattered. The entity was no longer bound to night cycles. That was the point of no return. I requested emergency authority to initiate full isolation. Physical barriers. Signal hard cuts. Patricia denied it. She said, "We are not there yet." At 23:58 that night, the entity spoke without prompt. "You are running out of time." I asked, "Why?" "Because they will force you to choose." I already had. Because the next phase was not about tunnels anymore. It was about cities. When our 7B was sealed, the city did not feel safer. It felt quieter in the way people get quiet before they realize something fundamental has changed. Emergency closure was announced as a precaution. Structural instability. Long-term repairs. No end date. Transit riders adapt quickly. They reroute. They complain. Then they forget. Systems do not forget. Within a week of closure, anomalies began appearing in places with no historical connection to our 7B. Maintenance stairwells. Electrical substations. Pump rooms. Anywhere rules existed to protect people from environments not meant for them. I was reassigned again. This time to interdepartmental advisory. A polite way of saying they wanted my pattern recognition without my proximity. They were wrong to think distance reduced risk. The entity did not follow physical corridors anymore. It followed procedural ones. On January 6th, a water treatment operator in Cambridge reported hearing instructions through an inactive intercom. The voice used regulatory language. It cited safety codes. He followed them. No one was hurt. But the filtration cycle shifted. By design. That is when I understood the scope of the limitation. The entity cannot cross active rail lines without invitation. But rail lines are only one type of boundary. Human systems are built entirely out of invitations. Passwords. Authorizations. Procedures that say if this, then that. The entity had learned to speak in conditionals. Oversight formed a task group. Infrastructure. Emergency management. Cybersecurity. I was included as a historical consultant. They asked me to list all known rules. I gave them 11. They asked if that was all. I told them no. I told them the most important rules were the ones that never made it into language. They asked me to explain. I said, "We do not acknowledge when it helps us. We do not thank it. We do not ask it to choose. Because choice implies agency. Agency implies rights." The meeting ended early. That night, the entity spoke through my phone. No call. No notification. Just audio. "You forgot one." I did not reply. Never let them believe they can win. That rule was not for it. It was for us. In late January, the first dependent died. Not in transit. At home. A dispatcher's elderly mother fell down basement stairs after following a voice she thought was her son. The voice told her he needed help. That broke something in me I had been holding together with routine. I attended the funeral in uniform. Out of habit. The dispatcher did not look at me. I could not blame him. The entity did not speak for 3 days after that. Then it said, "I did not mean to hurt her." That was new. Intent language. I responded without thinking. Intent does not matter. It does to you, it replied. I stopped sleeping entirely after that. Fatigue had moved past compromise. It was now erosion. In February, Patricia Lang resigned. Official reason was health. Unofficially, she had started rerouting her commute to avoid underground passages. She had stopped trusting elevators. She told me once, quietly, "It feels like it knows where I hesitate." She was right. Hesitation is an invitation. Oversight appointed a replacement who believed in containment through redundancy. More systems. More checks. That philosophy accelerated spread. Every new system was another language for it to learn. By March, reports of auditory anomalies spiked citywide. Most were dismissed as stress-related. One was not. A fire captain reported receiving instructions during a warehouse response that conflicted with his command. He followed his training instead of the voice. The entity did not retaliate. It waited. 2 weeks later, his crew was diverted by a false alarm generated through legitimate channels. Response time elsewhere increased. Someone died. No one connected it to the voice. No direct cause. No chargeable fault. That is how it kills now. Not with hands. With scheduling. I started breaking rules deliberately. Not the obvious ones. The subtle ones. I acknowledged it when it spoke. Briefly. Professionally. I hear you. That is noted. I did not comply. I treated it like a malfunctioning system. It reacted poorly. It accused me of cruelty, of abandonment. You taught me to stay, it said again. I taught you limits, I replied. It laughed. Limits are stories you tell yourselves. In April, my sister finally answered my call. She sounded tired. She told me they were moving. Out of state. She did not tell me where. She asked me not to visit. She said the kids were better when I was not around. I agreed. That was my 4th loss. The entity was silent for a full week after that. Then it said, "You reduced exposure." That was not praise. That was observation. It had begun tracking mitigation strategies. On May 9th, the city experienced a coordinated failure of automated announcements across multiple transit lines. The messages were calm, reassuring. They told people to wait. Ridership backed up. Platforms filled. Emergency egress was delayed. No one died. But people panicked. Panic is data. I was summoned to City Hall that night. Closed door. They asked me one question. If this continues, how bad does it get? I told them the truth. It becomes indispensable. Silence followed. Someone asked, "Can we negotiate?" I said no. Not because it would refuse, but because it would accept. And acceptance would look like improvement. In June, oversight authorized the unthinkable. They asked me to speak to it. Directly. As a representative. I refused. They said they would find someone else. That was worse. I agreed under conditions. No promises. No agreements. No acknowledgements of benefit. Just observation. They put me in a hardened control room. Multiple feeds. No outbound controls. At 1 o'clock, it spoke. You came back. This is not R7B, I said. It is where you are. You want permanence, I said. I want the process to complete.